A union is a form of collective worker organisation that gives workers the power to negotiate with their employers. Unions exercise power through actions such as strikes and protests. The mere threat of such action can itself be a powerful force, a force that helps to keep the powerful in check. Capitalism creates a massive power imbalance between those who work the means of production and those who own and control the means of production. These classes are integral to capitalism, and by definition there is a massive power imbalance that naturally forms between them. The capitalist class has far greater power than the working class. The capitalist class owns and controls the means of production. They also possess massive wealth and the power that comes with it. Their position in relation to the worker is one of massive dominance, a dominance that we would call autocratic, authoritarian, and tyrannical if it were to appear in the realm of politics. The capitalist has great power over the situation of the worker and, by extension, their well-being. The capitalist enjoys great power concerning everything from wages to workplace conditions. The capitalist possesses far more power than the worker, and a massive amount of power over the worker. To the lone worker, the capitalist is a leviathan with which one can only beg, if one dares to even do that. There is a massive power imbalance at play here. By definition, there is a massive power imbalance between those who own and control the means of production and those who work the means of production. But there is a solution: the union. The worker exists in a state of reliance that can easily be exploited by the capitalist. Fortunately, this reliance goes both ways. The capitalist is also reliant on the worker. But this reliance is by no means equal. The vast majority of the time, a single capitalist can do far more damage to the livelihood of a single worker than a single worker can do to the livelihood of a single capitalist. The capitalist does, after all, have a massive amount more power. Worst case scenario, they have a worker to replace. The worst case scenario faced by the worker, meanwhile, is losing access to their income and thereby their livelihood. Unless a worker is incredibly specialized, they have almost no negotiating power. We sometimes hear talk about how lone workers can upskill themselves to improve their ability to negotiate. The fact of the matter is that many jobs don't require particularly skilled workers, which means that these workers are highly replaceable and always will be. Specialized workers only have increased negotiating power because not everyone is specialized. If everyone was specialized, specialized workers would become replaceable and lose their negotiating power. So by definition, many people cannot increase their negotiating power by becoming more specialized workers. Many jobs are fairly simplistic. The workers of such jobs are replaceable, and there is nothing they can do about it. The individual worker lacks the power to make demands of the capitalist. As I say, they can only beg if they even dare to do that. The individual worker exists on the losing side of a massive power imbalance. But this power imbalance can become so much more balanced, if only the worker ceases to be an individual. And so the union is born. One worker can threaten to strike. Even if their threats are not empty, in the worst case scenario, all the capitalist needs to do is have someone work overtime while a replacement is found. This is often preferred over meeting the demands of the worker. But if all of your workers go on strike, things look very different. Suddenly your bottom line is taking a massive hit, and accepting the demands of the workers is beginning to look like a lesser evil. Sometimes the mere threat of the strike is enough to encourage the capitalist to keep the workers' interests in mind. The mere potential for work action embeds in the mind of the capitalist the knowledge that he can either appease or face the consequences. At the very heart of capitalism is a massive power imbalance between those who work the means of production and those who own and control the means of production. This power imbalance can very easily become the site of extreme oppression and exploitation, and thereby a great deal of suffering. The power imbalance provides the capacity for such hideous things. The profit motive, another key component of capitalism, provides an incentive for them. The union can turn that incentive against itself. Exploitation looks a lot less profitable when it will cause your workers to go on a massive strike. The trade union is a solution to the massive power imbalances of capitalism. It elevates the worker and rearranges industrial relations. Suddenly the little guy versus the big guy becomes a lot of little guys versus a big guy. Some may ask why we should care about the suffering of the workers. I invoke my rational maxims. As sentient beings, it is in our interest to promote respect for sentience. As beings who can suffer, it is in our interest to propagate empathy and compassion. As creatures who can feel pain, it is in our interest to create and maintain a humane society. On these grounds, we must set up the mechanisms that prevent cruelty and brutality. On these grounds, we must establish and maintain strong unions. Why are the capitalists not humane for these reasons? Because capitalism has implanted in them an irrational devotion to its profit framework, to the detriment of all other components of self-interest. Capitalism has infected them with an irrational desire for profit at any cost, and so they eagerly go about destroying the state of affairs that they ought to desire. A capitalist can be humane, but capitalism and its amoral profit motive propagates an irrational mindset that undermines and corrodes the rational desire. Capitalism creates a tendency for inhumanity. At best, it makes moral conduct unreliable. And so we must create mechanisms of artificial rationality. And so is born the union. A force to redirect their love of profit back in a more rational and humane direction. Suddenly considering the well-being of the workers becomes profitable, because if you don't, they can and will hit your bottom line hard. Unions are incredibly important. Without unions, workers have no power and are in no position to bargain. They can try, but without the ability to organize a strike, they have no power in relation to the employer, who can just refuse their demands with no more consequence than having a single person to replace. Without unions, the working class is powerless and at the mercy of the capitalist class. Unions allow those who work the means of production to negotiate with those who own and control the means of production on somewhat equal terms. Without unions, they can only beg, and have no choice but to accept whatever scraps they do or don't get thrown. Unions give workers the means to keep capitalists in line. Through unions, the workers can stand up for themselves and their rights. Unions help to regulate the powerful. They represent a limitation and counterbalance on the massive power of the capitalist class. Unions give workers power, the ability to say, no, this isn't good enough. Unions give workers the ability to stick up for themselves and secure their well-being. Without unions, workers are at the mercy of autocratic capitalist overlords. Unions are an important solution to a massive power imbalance between those who work the means of production and those who own and control it. Without unions to rectify that power imbalance, it so easily becomes characterized by great oppression, massive exploitation, and huge suffering. Unions are incredibly important. Those who oppose unions are opposed to human well-being and the regulation of the powerful.